The elevator hummed softly, its mirrored walls reflecting fragments of city lights from the 42nd floor. It was past midnight, and the building, usually alive with ringing phones and hurried footsteps, was silent. Inside, Richard Vail, CEO of the billion-dollar tech firm Lumion Systems, stood alone. He had just left the conference room where his board had approved a decision he'd been avoiding for months: massive layoffs. 400 people, some he knew by name, most he didn't, would lose their jobs by Monday. He pressed the elevator button. The doors slid shut, sealing him into a small, gleaming box of solitude. And before the elevator reached the 38th floor, something inside him cracked. A sound escaped his throat, soft, startled, unfamiliar. It was the kind of sound someone makes when a dam begins to break. He tried to swallow it down, but tears came anyway. Quiet at first, then unstoppable. His reflection blurred in the mirrored wall. Richard Vail, the man who'd been praised for his composure, was crying. The weight of a perfect mask. For 25 years, Richard had mastered the art of suppression. He'd learned early that leaders don't cry. Not when they lose a client, not when investors threaten withdrawal, not even when a marriage crumbles under the weight of late-night meetings and perpetual phone calls. Control equals power, his father once told him. Emotion equals weakness. And Richard had believed it. His colleagues described him as unshakable. Analysts called him the cold strategist. Reporters wrote about his calm under pressure. And he wore each description like armor, until that night. But emotional armor corrodes from the inside. He had built an empire, yes, but he had also built walls around his own humanity. And tonight, in the stillness of an elevator, those walls were finally too heavy to hold. The unseen cracks. The layoffs were not the real cause of his breakdown. They were simply the final blow to years of hidden exhaustion. For months, he had felt a numbness spreading through his days. He couldn't remember the last time he'd slept through the night. He couldn't recall the last genuine laugh he'd shared with his daughter, who had stopped calling after he missed her college graduation. He couldn't even name the last book he'd read that wasn't a quarterly report. But he could recall numbers, profit margins, stock valuations, productivity charts, flawlessly. That's what success looked like, wasn't it? Numbers over feelings, outcomes over empathy, control over chaos. Except control had its cost. He'd started waking up with his chest tight, his stomach clenched, his mind already sprinting before his feet hit the floor. His assistant noticed the tremor in his hand when he signed documents. His doctor warned him about his blood pressure. His therapist, whom he'd only visited twice, told him that emotional suppression doesn't erase pain, it stores it. She said, "It's like holding your breath underwater. You can do it for a while, but eventually you'll surface, gasping." And tonight, in the elevator, he surfaced. By the 20th floor, his shoulders were shaking. He pressed his palms to his face, embarrassed by the sound of his own sobbing. What if someone saw him? What if the security cameras recorded this? The thought of his image, broadcast, dissected, ridiculed, made his stomach twist. A CEO crying alone in an elevator was not the kind of headline investors liked. He took a breath that hurt to hold, but the tears didn't stop. They came in waves: grief for the people he was about to disappoint, shame for the family he'd already lost, confusion for the man he had become. Each tear seemed to wash away a layer of the image he had spent years perfecting, and beneath it, he met someone he hadn't seen in a long time: himself. Not Richard Vale, CEO of Lumion Systems, just Richard Vale, human being. Psychologists call it emotional suppression, the act of consciously inhibiting the outward expression of feelings. Society calls it professionalism. But what it really does is disconnect the mind from the heart. It teaches people, especially men in power, that vulnerability is dangerous, that tears are unproductive, that empathy slows efficiency. Richard had lived by that doctrine until it hollowed him out. He had silenced his anxiety until it became insomnia. He had ignored loneliness until it became indifference. He had suppressed sadness until it erupted as rage directed at subordinates, at screens, at himself. Now, in the elevator, his body was reclaiming what his mind had denied. Every tear was data unprocessed, emotion deferred. And in that private collapse, there was something pure, almost sacred. It was the first honest emotion he had allowed himself in years. The elevator halted suddenly at the 17th floor. The jolt startled him. He wiped his face, adjusted his tie, inhaled sharply. The doors slid open. A young intern stood there, holding a stack of documents. Her eyes widened when she saw him, eyes rimmed with the kind of fatigue he used to ignore in others. "Mr. Vale?" she asked softly. He froze, a tear still glistening on his cheek. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled. Not a polite smile, but a knowing one. The kind that said, "I see you, and it's okay." He nodded slightly, stepped back, and let the doors close again. When the elevator began moving once more, he exhaled a shaky laugh. He realized something profound in that brief encounter. Vulnerability doesn't always destroy respect. Sometimes it deepens it. By the time the elevator reached the ground floor, Richard felt lighter. Not fixed, but human again. He stepped out into the lobby, the air cool against his swollen eyes. Outside, the city pulsed, cars moving, lights flickering, life continuing. He watched the night through the glass doors and thought of the people whose lives he was about to change. For the first time, he didn't think of them as resources. He thought of them as people, each with families, fears, and fragile hopes like his own. He made a decision that night. He would face the board tomorrow, not as a man of power, but as a man of conscience. He would not hide behind corporate language. He would speak the truth. That leadership without empathy is a form of failure. That emotional honesty is not weakness, but wisdom. Because perhaps the most dangerous lie of leadership isn't, "I know everything." It's, "I feel nothing." Months later, after the layoffs and restructuring, Richard began holding small meetings with employees, not as a CEO, but as a listener. He admitted the cost of his mistakes. He shared the story of that night, the elevator, the breakdown. To his surprise, people didn't see weakness. They saw courage. And one by one, others began sharing their own stories, of burnout, anxiety, loss. The office, once silent and sterile, began to breathe again. Richard never forgot that night in the elevator. He came to see it not as the moment he broke, but as the moment he began to heal. Because sometimes the strongest thing a leader can do is to cry where no one expects them to.